Good morning or afternoon, Year 7s. This is Miss Lawson. On behalf of the whole of the English department, bringing you another day worth of work for you. Hopefully you got an okay. We've had a couple of emails, obviously struggling and trying to understand the word illusion and kind of understanding what we're doing, and that is okay. Okay, but there's no pressure to get everything right. It is a new term. We've all had several months off. There's new terms. You haven't really had any time in class. So if you're not understanding it, or if you're feeling really overwhelmed with work, please don't worry too much, okay? Pop us an email, or your head of year, or get your parents to email, and we'll try to make some phone calls home just to make sure that you guys are okay. And remember, hopefully, touch wood, you will be back in class next week in order to be able to help you further. But hopefully these videos are helping lots of you. We've had lots and lots of lovely work in, so really well done to all of you that have managed that. And you know, even if you're just trying your best, that's what you can do. So really well done. Let's just kind of have a little recap for 1 second. So click onto this link here. Remember, we were looking at Prometheus, which is he was the god from the story of Pandora's box, and he was the one that we looked at a clip from yesterday as well. And also I showed you a clip of Frankenstein, and what you had to do was to find similarities between Prometheus and Frankenstein and find differences, because ultimately we're comparing, and to make a comparison you're looking at one thing and you're looking at the other. So if I'm holding up a banana in one hand and I'm looking at an apple at the other, I'm going to discuss how they are similar and how they are different. Well, they're both fruit, for instance, but one's yellow and, well, preferably, hopefully one's yellow and one's green, for instance. You eat both, but perhaps you could talk about one is long and one is round. So you're finding similarities and differences, and this is what we need to do between the two characters. Now, both aren't real. We're not talking about Frankenstein's monster, remember, we're talking about Frankenstein, who was the scientist. We're looking at a man who created a monster, and we're looking at another man, Prometheus, who created human beings. How are they similar? Well, we can carry on looking at them in more detail. But first, let's just have a recap for a second about the word illusion. Now, some of you are struggling with the term illusion. That's okay. It is a technique, a writer's technique, that's something you're going to cover in the next few years, but not everyone's going to get it in Year 7. Don't understand it? It's absolutely fine. Below the link of this on Go for Schools, there is a link for a YouTube video that you can watch, and it will explain illusion in a really fun, loving way. It's got like cartoon figures and things. You just click on that, watch that, see if it makes any more sense. But I have done this slide for you as well to hopefully explain it a little bit further. And the more you practice, the more you'll understand. So the actual definition of illusion, the simple definition, is a technique. That's not supposed to be an, that's an A technique. To remind you of something without mentioning it exactly. So I'm going to hint at something without saying it. A suggestion of, it's a reference to, similar to. So really, if I'm hinting at something, if you really would like to have a piece of chocolate cake from your parent or guardian's kitchen, and you don't want to mention the word cake, you might find a way to hint at it without actually getting it. And it's sort of along that line. Have a look at this picture here, and I really like this picture. Now this picture here is called The Scream, and it's a very famous picture. You probably have seen it before, and it was painted a long time ago. But more recently, we see these masks here. Now, these masks came from a film, the Scream movie, but also we see them every Halloween, don't we? We see people wearing these Scream masks. This mask here is an allusion to this picture. Okay, you can see you've got similar mouths. It isn't necessarily walking around as a picture, but it's an allusion to, it's a hint of that picture. It's similar to, it's a reference to, it's a suggestion of. Okay, for someone who has created a mask and then obviously a film has hinted at this picture, but they've not actually mentioned the picture. Okay, one way to describe it. So with that in mind, we are trying to find how Frankenstein and the author has hinted at the story of Prometheus. Let's have a read through the extract of Frankenstein. I'm going to pop this. This link is also on your Go for Schools. Now, last lesson we read through the Prometheus extract. We're going to read through this one together. There are some trickier words in this. Okay, I'll explain to you as we go. So, it was a dreary night of November that I beheld the accomplishment of my toils. With an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, I collected the instruments of life around me, that I might infuse a spark of being in the lifeless thing that lay at my feet. It was already 1 in the morning, and the rain pattered dismally against the panes, and my candle was nearly burnt out, when, by the glimmer of the half-extinguished light, I saw the dull eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and in a convulsive motion agitated its limbs. How can I describe my emotions at this catastrophe, or how delineate the wretched who, with such infinite pains and care, I had endeavoured to form? His limbs were in proportion, and I had selected his features as beautiful. Beautiful? Great God! His yellow skin scarcely covered the muscles and arteries beneath. His hair was a lustrous black and flowing. His teeth of a pearly whiteness, but these luxuriancies only formed a more horrid contrast with his watery eyes, that seemed almost of the same colour as the dun white sockets in which they were set, his shrivelled complexion and straight black lips. Now, let's just go through this again to explain it. So it was a dreary night, so kind of overcast and dull and horrible, miserable night of November, that he beheld, so he saw the accomplishment of his hard work. Toils means hard work. He's been obviously trying to create this monster, and it's finally going to happen tonight. It's in November. It says accomplishment, because I'm thinking he's feeling quite proud of himself at this point. He feels like he's created something that's going to be magical and wonderful, and with an anxiety that almost amounted to agony, which I find a really interesting word. So he's so anxious it's almost painful. I collected the instruments of life around me. So, like I said, this is from the perspective of the scientist. So he's collected these medical and scientific instruments to make sure that he's bringing this person to life, this body to life. Then I might infuse a spark of being into a lifeless thing that lay at my feet. So you imagine this body laying at his feet, and he's going to put a spark of electricity into it, and he's going to bring it alive. It was already 1 in the morning, and the rain obviously pattered dismally against the panes, and his candle was nearly burnt out. But then, this is half extinguished, which means nearly finished. He saw the dull eye of the creature open. It breathed hard, and in a convulsive motion. So to convulse, a convulsion, it means your arms and legs are really kind of shaking and jerking. He agitated his limbs. The second paragraph here, he's now going to describe how he felt as it became alive. He created it and he brought it to life. Well, it wasn't as perfect as he'd hoped it was going to be. He says here that he had endeavoured, he tried to form something that was going to be amazing. Okay, so he'd chosen limbs and arms and legs that were in the right size, and he'd selected features as beautiful, but actually, no, it really was not beautiful in the slightest. And he goes into real detail here about how the yellow skin was scarcely covering the muscles and the arteries. So you can imagine all the muscles and the arteries poking through his skin. It didn't look very nice. However, we got to think the question, why am I asking you this question? Why am I trying to make a comparison between Frankenstein and Prometheus? Well, let's have a think about it. They were both essentially, oh actually no, sorry, go back for a second. We have to look at the text and kind of highlight those words. So on your extract, which you'll have a copy of, you can either print it off and highlight using a highlighter or a felt tip or a pen, or simply don't have that, you can just make a note of these in your book or in your piece of paper and make sure you write down the definitions, okay, so you know that you're understanding that extract a bit. And this is one of the things that Samuel, we will try to push you with your vocabulary, and you know, if you're not understanding things, just stop, pause, go over it again, and so that the next lesson, the next week, the next month, the next year, you'll know these words, okay. So on the right hand side it says be prepared to feedback. You can't obviously do that, however, which quotes or which words are showing you that the creation of a monster is a negative thing? Okay, and we're not looking for positives, because actually it's not a positive thing. As we see in the second half of that extract, it's really not a positive thing. So go back to the extract and see if you can add any other words that you think might be meaning that it's a negative thing. So you might have to pause this video and go back and have a look. For instance, I find it really interesting, like I said earlier, that the writer has chosen to use agony. Okay, actually the writer was a female, so we'll make sure we say she. She's chosen to use the word agony. Now, agony obviously means, deeply painful. Why would she write that? Well, I think that's kind of hinting at the fact that something is bad going to happen. It's not a painless thing that Frankenstein is doing. It's causing Frankenstein to be going through a lot of agony and trauma to bring this person to life, which, brings us to the question, why did he bother? But he did. Okay, so go through that, pause this video, make sure you make a note of those words and any other words that will point to it being a negative. Okay, so having looked at the fact of these two extracts, Prometheus and Frankenstein clearly have a lot in common. Okay, create a Venn diagram with key words or sentences taken from the extracts to illustrate the similarities and their differences. Okay, so in order for me to help you further, I have actually carried out this task, just helped you a little. So I've already filled it in. Obviously, with your Venn diagram, the two kind of circles are where it meets and overlaps. These are your similarities. You don't actually have to write the word similarities in there if you don't want to, but anything that's in that middle section are where the two people, the two protagonists, two characters are exactly the same. So I've filled it in. So the similarity is that they both created life. Okay, so we can argue that they both created life. However, Frankenstein created his monster selfishly. He wasn't told to, he wanted to. It was accomplishment for him. Whereas Prometheus was told by Zeus to make human beings. So there are two differences. At the end result, Frankenstein wasn't proud of what he had created at all. He was actually totally aghast at what he'd created, whereas Prometheus was proud of what he had achieved. Tell me if I can spell as well. He was proud of the human beings that they had done. Now I could carry on filling this in. For instance, they both wanted them to have 2 arms and 2 legs. Okay, but you could honestly then find more differences about how they've treated their monster. Prometheus wanted to give them more gifts, didn't he? He wanted to help them and give them more gifts, and he ends up giving them fire. Whereas Frankenstein, really, he was just shocked and didn't really want to give the monster any help or kindness whatsoever. So actually, having done that, you'll have, hopefully, maybe you can find 3 for each side and perhaps 2 similarities. You will then be able to answer the final question, which you'll be carrying out next week. Okay, so let's just recap what you need to have done. You need to have looked at your extract. Okay, you should have watched the YouTube clip for the illusions, which is below. You should have made a note of the new words, and then you will have drawn a Venn diagram with the differences and the similarities, because what you're going to do next lesson is you're going to have a question, and these are kind of style questions you're going to come across. Maybe you've come across them in primary school already. If not, it doesn't matter. But a reader, having read this section of Frankenstein, said, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, and Mary Shelley is obviously the author, so Frankenstein has illusions of the myth of Prometheus. In both stories they have created human life, then they both suffered in the end. To what extent do you agree? You will then write your answer next lesson. Don't panic. I'm going to take you through next lesson of how you're going to put your answer together. It's going to be one simple paragraph for you just to answer next lesson. I'm going to teach you how to do that. The question here is quite crucial. And it says, then they both suffered at the end. Remember, we did see Prometheus being pecked at by eagles. Did Frankenstein? Ask a question. Did Frankenstein suffer, or was it just his monster suffering? Once you've done those things, like I said, keep all your work in a really neat, tidy place for you to be able to bring into lessons. You can send your work into your teachers, so that not just me, but also all your teachers, and they can see what you're doing. And any questions, please also email your teachers and ask for any more clarification. I hope everyone's okay, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.